Last week, Prime Minister Narendra Modi chaired a meeting with various political representatives from Jammu and Kashmir to discuss the future of the newly formed Union Territory. It is expected that statehood will soon be granted back to Jammu and Kashmir, and the meeting was presumably a step in that direction. There has been much speculation over the fate of Kashmiri Hindus, but unfortunately, the government has ignored the community again and instead has preferred to speak with the separatists who pretend to be political parties. It's been over 30 years now since my entire community of Kashmiri Hindus got kicked out of Kashmir. Kashmir was our home for thousands of years. We were the Aborigines, the original inhabitants of the valley, since the time when Satisar, the mythical lake, was drained by the great Kashyap Rishi. When we were expelled from Kashmir in 1990, the government of India and the Hindu society at large was indifferent to our plight, and for very different reasons. The Home Minister of India then was Mufti Muhammad Sayyid, a sworn Islamist himself, who had great sympathy for the cause of the so-called Azadi of Kashmiri Muslims from India. And thus he did absolutely nothing to protect our community from the fanatical, bloodthirsty majority. The Hindu society, on the other hand, was in La La Land, enjoying the bliss of ignorance. With the advent of the internet and the ensuing information boom, more people came to know about our plight. But by that time, mini Kashmirs had started erupting in pockets all over the country, and the existential threat to Hindus was no longer ignorable. Our story became a politically charged talking point on TV discussions, lit fests, and high-profile conclaves. From an ignored micro-minority, we had become the foremost symbol of Hindu victimhood in modern India. But in recent times, we have transitioned from being the symbol of Hindu victimhood to a symbol of Hindu cowardice. And many well-meaning Hindus, whose knowledge of Kashmir history and politics comes from shouting matches on nationalist news channels, now blame us for our situation. They deserve it is a common refrain in the so-called right-wing circles. In this talk, I will, one, provide a quick overview of the historical struggle of Kashmiri Hindus against Islamic extremism and secessionism. Two, correct popular misconceptions about Kashmiri Hindus and their exile. Three, try to familiarize you with the intricacies of the matter of return of Kashmiri Pandits to the valley. And four, share a vision of the return and rehabilitation of the community that can truly bring closure to this issue. Jammu and Kashmir is going through an unprecedented political churn in the history of independent India. We know that in August 2019, Article 370 was made inoperative. Ladakh was separated from the rest of the region and given the status of an independent union territory. Now, again, there are talks of the return of statehood to the rest of the region, that is the Jammu province and the Kashmir Valley put together. This, in my opinion, is the undoing of whatever benefit had accrued from the landmark move of August 2019. It goes without saying that in all of this, Kashmiri Hindus are being ignored yet again, as are the Hindus of Jammu. We've already told the story of Jammu earlier in one of our videos from last year, and we'll provide the link in the description below. But in this talk, I will focus on Kashmiri Hindus. In all our presentations on Kashmir, we have kept on repeating that Kashmir is not a political problem, but a religious conflict and a civilizational battle. The clearest evidence for this claim is that the expulsion of Hindus from the valley in 1990 was not an unprecedented event, but in fact, the seventh such occurrence in the history of Kashmir. The first expulsion of Hindus from the valley took place 600 years before 1990, towards the end of the 14th century of the Common Era, immediately after the first Islamic dynasty captured the throne of Kashmir. What is most interesting is that before Islam came to the valley, the Kashmiri identity was quite amorphous, given that there was a regular inflow of immigrants to the exalted land of Sharda Devi from other parts of India. For example, the great Kashmiri genius, the sage of sages, Abhinav Gupta, himself was born to first generation immigrants from Madhya Desha, or modern day Uttar Pradesh. Why do I bring up this fact about Kashmiri identity here? Because it means that the Kashmiri Pandits who lived in the valley till 1990 and their ancestors, by the very definition of the term, are those people who resisted the most brutal atrocities for 600 years. 600 years, and yet did not convert to Islam. Even in 1990, we chose to leave all our material wealth behind for the sake of Hindu Dharma. Remember that the next time some Hindutva paper tiger on Twitter calls us cowards. Like we have shown in our video on Kashmir history released in January 2021, earlier this year, the history of medieval Kashmir is the history of Hindu struggle against growing Islamization of the valley. Whether it is the Kashmiri king Sangram Raj forcing Mahmud Ghaznavi to retreat more than once, or the heroic Brahmin Pandit Nirmal Kant initiating a massive campaign to reconvert 800 forcibly converted Kashmiris back to the Hindu fold in the 16th century. Or the far-sighted Mahanand Dhar arranging for Punjabi Hindus to settle in the valley in the 18th century, or the strategic Birbal Dhar traveling all the way to Maharaja Ranjit Singh's court to convince him to attack the Afghans and paving the way for Sikh rule in Kashmir. Nowadays, there is a trend to show Kashmiri Hindus as traitors and to spin a narrative that they were in bed with their oppressors. Because, you know what? Nehru was a Kashmiri Pandit. This is a pathetic argument that many people readily swallow due to their pathetic knowledge of history. The fact is that it was KPs who played a key role in the legitimization of the Dogra rule in Kashmir, and after 1947, it was Kashmiri Hindu leaders like Shiv Narayan Photedar who worked hard for the integration of Jammu and Kashmir with the Indian Union and raised their voices against Article 370. Now, some common allegations made about Kashmiri Hindus. 1. KPs were secular pacifists who accepted defeat. As I explained just now, the Kashmiri Hindu identity itself flies in the face of such notions, because we are talking about a community that held on to Dharma for 600 years, resisting, fighting back, lying low, hiding from tyrants, chopping off the noses of our daughters to save them from being abducted, or making strategic alliances with Hindu rulers from the plains. Basically anything to keep the flag of Dharma flying in Kashmir. Another allegation is that Kashmiri Pandits supported Nehru for Article 370. This is again completely off the mark. The community was painfully aware of their demographic disadvantage, as is clear from their attempts to bring Hindus from other parts of India to settle in the valley as far back as the 18th century. Like I mentioned, KP leaders like Shivnarayan Potedar openly criticized Nehru for implementing Article 370. Oh, and by the way, Jawaharlal Nehru was the Prime Minister of India, not a Kashmiri leader. Just as Gandhi was a national leader, not a representative of Gujaratis. The third misconception, that Kashmiri Hindus should have taken up arms and fought back instead of leaving the valley. This is again one of the most stupid arguments made by these keyboard warriors who have no idea of the realities of Kashmir, where fully armed and professionally trained security forces lose men to terror attacks from time to time. Expecting a civilian micro-minority, which is scattered all over the valley, living in handful of numbers in various villages, to fight back and survive is delusional, to put it mildly. Also, who would supply them arms? In a few years, they will talk about the Hindus of Bangladesh also like that, but will not question why the Hindu nationalist government presently in power in India won't intervene and stop the ongoing genocide of Bangladeshi Hindus right next door. One more allegation is that Kashmiri Hindus are divided, which is why they are ignored. Well, all communities everywhere in the world are divided. And this includes Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, Buddhists, Tamilians, Bengalis, Eskimo, and any linguistic, ethnic, or religious group you can think of. That is just basic human nature. And even the secessionist movement in Kashmir has scores of factions that don't see eye to eye. But it is only and only Kashmiri Hindus whose political struggle is delegitimized using this pseudo argument. What's worse, many people in the community, that is the Kashmiri Hindu community, have internalized this government propaganda and believe this fairy tale. The truth is that the government of India has worked hard to widen the natural fault lines in the community to cover for their ineptitude and lack of spine. If the government recognizes the centuries-long physical and cultural genocide of Kashmiri Hindus, then the internal differences of opinion within the community will stop mattering. And they will have to do the right thing. Okay, so let me put the Kashmir issue in perspective for you. If you're a non-Kashmiri, that is a non-Kashmiri Hindu, let me tell you that when you stand in solidarity with Kashmiri Pandits, you don't do us any favor. In fact, it is a favor you do to yourself and your children and grandchildren and so on and so forth, because without the safe and sustainable return of Hindus to Kashmir, you will find yourself losing ground all over India, in pockets where Hindus are in a minority. As far as Kashmiri Hindus are concerned, we are on the brink of extinction and really have nothing to lose anymore. But remember, this is an infinite game, and short-term finite victories simply do not matter. Unfortunately, the myopic Indian state can only see as far as its nose, which extends up to the next election. And so the government works hard to delude its citizens for their votes. The return of statehood to the valley, if it happens, will be one such delusion that will undo all the potential good that had accrued after the removal of Article 370. Installing a puppet regime, pumping money into the valley, building infrastructure, generating employment, promoting tourism, and after a few years toppling the first regime and replacing it with another puppet. All this is old wine in a new bottle. This is exactly how Congress under Nehru and Indira and Rajiv handled Kashmir. This government seems to be following suit. For the 999th time, Kashmir does not need development. It needs Hindus and it needs them safe and secure. For the last 20 years, all governments, whether under Vajpayee, Manmohan Singh, or Modi, have tried to lure Kashmiri Pandits back to the valley with offers of government jobs or real estate. Some people have taken up the offer and returned. Many others may return in the future too. The government wants to send us back without addressing the cause of our forced exodus in the first place. People who take up the government's offer go for their own reasons and at their own risk. But as soon as they land there in the valley, they start singing bhajans of Kashmiriyat as a survival strategy. These tactical signals for self-preservation get picked up by the media and the government to reinforce the narrative that everything is fine in the valley and that the only reason why other KPs are not returning is because they are well settled and have no intention of ever going back. This is pure bullshit. But that does not matter as long as it serves the government's purpose of closing the chapter of the seventh and the last exodus of Hindus from Kashmir. But this cynical strategy of the government has the potential for long-term irreversible damage to the civilizational integrity of India. How? Well, all said and done, the so-called Azadi movement is a popular uprising, and it is impossible to deny that it has overwhelming support of the local populace. In view of the democratic principle of the right to self-determination, the Indian state is on slippery slope. The only factor that has really helped India retain its claim on the valley is the fact that the Tehreek-e-Azadi, or whatever they call it, turned out to be a terrorist movement that forced 500,000 innocent people out of the valley. An insincere and fake closure achieved by sending a few thousand Hindus back into the same conditions that they escaped from, and achieving that with the help of offering short-term material benefits, propaganda and media-sponsored lies, would give back the legitimacy to the Tehreek and internationally project the whole thing as a people's movement or a freedom struggle that also has the support of religious minorities who have now returned to the valley. Just think about what that implies for India's claim on Kashmir and what losing Kashmir would mean for the Hindus in the rest of India. Therefore, if India is to survive as a non-Islamic nation, it cannot afford to make a mockery of Kashmiri Pandits. The Indian state is not just duty-bound to dispense justice to KPs, but it must do so for its own sake. Justice for Kashmiri Pandits can only be delivered through a sincere attempt at reversal of the genocide inflicted on us for more than 6 centuries. If justice is not done, it would only mean that Hindus have given up their stake on Kashmir, and that is a sure shot path to extinction, not just of the Kashmiri Hindu identity and culture, but of Hindu civilization itself. Losing Kashmir would mean preparing ground for India to formally become part of the Islamic sphere, joining the ranks of Pakistan and Bangladesh. The return of Kashmiri Hindus to their homes with honor and dignity is the only real option available to the government. In order to achieve that, it must frame a law. Let us call it the Resettlement of Kashmiri Hindus Act, which divides the valley into two and declares half of it as a separate union territory carved for the settlement of Kashmiri Hindus in the valley. We are not concerned with what the government does with the other half. Keep it as a UT or grant it statehood or whatever you want to do. But let us focus on what the act would mean. The Resettlement Act would explicitly acknowledge the 600 years of genocide and the ensuing transgenerational trauma caused to Kashmiri Hindus. It would seek to create the right conditions for its immediate termination, if not reversal. Given that there would be no transfer of Muslim population out of the newly carved Union territory, it is incumbent on the government to ensure the safety and security of the returning Hindus, who would still be under threat from the local Muslims. Here are some of the provisions I would expect the legislation to have. 1. Make the denial of atrocities against Kashmiri Hindus a punishable offense. 2. Grant compensation to the Hindus for the loss of life and property caused to them due to government inaction in 1990. 3. Set up special courts and a ministry of KP rehabilitation to facilitate the resettlement. 4. Grant Hindus the right to bear arms in the Union territory and provide training for the same. 5. Treat complaints by Hindus of atrocities committed against them as cognizable, non-bailable, and non-compoundable offences. 6. Impose enhanced fines for government officials who commit atrocities against Hindus, as they often did in the past. 7. Constitute a temple restoration department that rebuilds destroyed and damaged Hindu shrines. 8. Identify areas of potential atrocities against Hindus based on historical data and disarm the Muslim population in those areas. 9. Establish a continuous monitoring system for crimes against Hindus along with a monthly reporting mechanism at district level. And 10. Include provisions for imposing collective fines and attaching the properties of those found guilty of committing atrocities against the Hindu minority, like they do in the case of riots. If you think that these are unreasonable and unjust demands, you have no idea what living as a Hindu in Muslim-majority Kashmir means. The points I have enumerated are not unheard of, and there are existing laws in India that have been framed exactly in this manner. For example, we have the Scheduled Castes and Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989, commonly known as the SC/ST Act, even though the premise of that act is largely fictional. In the case of Kashmir, irrefutable evidence of atrocities against Hindus stares us in the face. Will the government of India grow a pair?